Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of America. Tonight we take a look at the major stories from around the world. O.J. Simpson is on the run from the police yet again. Cardi B has been assassinated following massive criticism over her new album. And our headline story. The nuclear power plant in North Korea has been malfunctioning and is posing danger to millions of lives. But before we dive into this story, let's take a look at the ecological disaster that struck northern Ukraine 32 years ago and changed the face of nuclear energy. Here with more, NBC nuclear correspondent Adam Baum.
65 miles north of Kiev, near the Pripyat River, is a town devoid of human settlement. Animals may thrive in this now wildlife sanctuary, but years ago, this area held the site of the famous Chernobyl reactor, the pride of the Soviet Union's nuclear power program. The newly minted RMBK plant held 4 reactors. Improperly trained operators conducted an experiment to test the functionality of Reactor 4 in low power conditions. This test included shutting off the automatic safeguards preventing reactor meltdowns, and removing the neutron rods designed to limit fusion in the reactor. The result of running the reactor at 7% power? Disaster on April 26, 1:23 a.m. When rods were reinserted to slow the rate of reaction, the heat generated turned the coolant liquid into steam. And the rod's graphite tips ignited it into an explosion that released mass amounts of radioisotopes of iodine-131 and uranium into the air. 32 people died in just the first day of the disaster. The catastrophe had just begun to unfold.
The Chernobyl explosion was the worst nuclear reactor disaster in history, not only for the initial property damage, but also the forced relocation of 150,000 Pripyat residents and later 220,000 residents of nearby Ukraine and Belarus. The nuclear fallout covered much of Europe, putting a large population of people in danger. Let's take a closer look at just how profound the health side effects of the disaster were.
Initially, only 32 people died from the disaster, but within weeks, the number affected by radiation sickness had risen to over 134. In 2005, a study reported cases of thyroid cancer and caused by radioactive iodine from Chernobyl. Those affected was about 6,000. To date, over 500,000 people have been exposed to radiation at Chernobyl. While the disaster certainly precipitated a rise in cancers and radiation poisoning, it should be noted that the rise of cancers in Eastern Europe predated the Chernobyl explosion.
Adam Baum. Beyond human health detriments, Chernobyl also decimated the surrounding environment. More than 200,000 square kilometers of Europe were contaminated by radioactive particles in the air, covering Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine, extending to parts of UK. Plants became contaminated, leading to high levels of radioactivity within the milk of grazing animals. Coniferous trees died, their needles turning dusty red, which earned the region the name the Red Forest. Water supplies in nearby rivers, as well as vegetation, absorbed radioactive particles. This led to a rise in contaminated vegetables, fish, and livestock that remains even today in some levels.
You're right that the initial explosion decimated surrounding environments. However, water dilution along with natural radioactive decay actually decreased radioactivity levels. Traces certainly remain, particularly in forests, which were exposed to the highest amounts of cesium-137, but wildlife has capitalized upon the absence of humans. Aerial surveys of elk, roe deer, and boar demonstrated steady rises. In fact, wolves, lynxes, and beavers are thriving in the abandoned areas. It can pretty much be concluded that humans suck.
Well, what about the political ramifications? To the Soviet Union, Chernobyl was an embarrassment, a colossal technological failure during a trailing effort in the Cold War. In turn, the USSR attempted to cover up the event and avoid letting the news reach the outside world. It was the Swedish who, through their air quality tests, realized that the nuclear incident had occurred. The Iron Curtain was a barrier to international relations. According to many historians and political correspondents, the events at Chernobyl led to glasnost and the ultimate demise of the Soviet Union.
Rest in peace, comrade.
So did the reactor malfunction benefit international relations in this sense?
Well, yes. Chernobyl was a watershed moment for nuclear power regulations as a whole. RMBK reactors, like Chernobyl, were modified to prevent future explosions. Also, over 1,000 USSR engineers came to the West to observe nuclear safety protocols after 1989, spurring international nuclear power reforms. In 1989, the World Association of Nuclear Operators was formed to regulate nuclear power and promote safe practices. Furthermore, in 1988, a joint resolution was passed by the International Atomic Energy Association that partnered previous Vienna and Paris conventions. These conventions set guidelines for damage compensation to civilians following disasters like Chernobyl. It was a global effort to prepare for and limit such events.
So, what does this mean for the future of nuclear energy then, with the cons that come with it? For nations looking to start nuclear power programs, the cost and time of construction can be high initially due to the amount of safety protocols. Additionally, nuclear power plants present health risks for miners of uranium, a non-reusable resource. Seeing as no nuclear radiation kills, the waste must be disposed of properly, and few such waste storage sites exist. Most of all, nuclear power plants present the possibility of an uncontrollable catastrophe, such as the events at Chernobyl. The cleanup and recovery from such potential disasters can be astronomically expensive, such as the dome for Chernobyl.
Like anything in science, there's a level of risk involved in new ideas. Yet nuclear power offers an affordable, energy-efficient alternative to carbon fuels. Without emitting carbon fuel levels of greenhouse gases, nuclear power produces 10 million times as much energy. Additionally, reactors are fairly cheap to maintain, even though they are costly to build. And they last up for 60 years, so that makes the investment worth it.
Breaking news out in Florida! OJ has been spotted speeding in downtown Orlando in a minivan. Okay, we're done. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of America. Tonight we take a look. One sec. Nuclear correspondent Adam Baum.
65 miles north of Kiev, near the Pripyat River. This is gonna take forever. When rods were reinserted.
Again.
Could you say the word inserted any more, like any?
Reinserted.
You can say it in a creepier way. When the rods were reinserted.
Go. We say go and then we can lift.
Yeah.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Really crazy.
You miss me?
It's like Shauna's girlfriend right
You
here.
miss me? It's a long distance relationship.
Long distance relationship. Hi. Hi, little girl. Oh wait, no.